I bet.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic. Do you know, I've got great admiration for anyone who can go more than about 20 foot off the ground. Because I haven't got a thing for heights at all. So the fact you can do any of this stuff, and I'm dying to hear what you've got to say today. It should be a really interesting interview. So I don't know anyone else on this call, actually. I don't know if Pradeep's on yet today, but I know we have one or two other people who join us from time to time who are love doing some of the more adventurous stuff. You've had your bit of a go as well, Chris, haven't you, in the past?
Oh yeah, you mentioned that. Well, I've done a few things, but nothing like, I'm embarrassed, nothing like Cathy. I think the highest I've been to is 5,400 meters, so nothing like 8,800 or whatever Everest is. But I tell you what that does is it's given me an appreciation of what it is that Cathy do to go to that altitude and the effect it has on you and your body, even at 5,400 meters. Every step is hard work. So I don't know what it's like another 3,000 or so, 400 meters higher. But that was in a mountain in Bolivia. But I've done things like the Inca Trail and various long walks and a quadrathlon and various things last year. So, but nothing. I couldn't do Everest, I don't think, and I certainly couldn't do Nanga Parbat. But I can get pleasure out of reading Cathy's blogs.
Yeah. Altitude is interesting because it's very hard to imagine, if you've never been up there, when your body just doesn't work the way you're used to because there's just less oxygen available to you. It's a hard thing to describe to someone who hasn't experienced it.
No, God,
yeah. It's weird, isn't it? Just that kind of heaviness, and every step is hard, and the laboured breathing. And I guess, Cathy, you must have experienced that when you get that breathing and you're laying in a tent and you're at night, you're just.
That's just horrible. And there's a thing called Stokes breathing that comes in at high altitude. I don't know if you got it, but it's when you actually stop breathing until the carbon dioxide buildup is so strong, it triggers the breathing reflex, and you gasp, you jerk away, gasping for breath, feeling as if you're suffocating. Start to hyperventilate, which of course immediately is the wrong thing to do, because now you're still not getting oxygen in. And it just makes trying to sleep the most awful process. I think that's what I really don't miss about high altitude mountaineering: insomnia and Stokes breathing.
Oh, that was horrendous. So you've experienced that a few times, have you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fairly standard once you get to real high altitude. I'm trying to sleep at, say, 7,000 meters, kind of every night. You're desperate to rest and regenerate, and yet your nights are just this horrible, repetitive experience of kind of waking up suffocating. Yeah. I understand.
Cathy, we'll come back in just a second if that's all right, because we just normally have a little bit of a quick intro, and then we'll obviously start to get into the real nub of things. Obviously, those of you who are joining us right now, if you could just kindly introduce yourselves in the chat, just tell us a little bit about what you do, why you do it, in other words, how you like to make a difference, and also be bold with your questions. Don't be timid and backwards and coming forwards. The only thing I would ask is just not put web links in there. Obviously, it's about sharing value today. So just bear that in mind. I'll just give a very brief intro into me, and obviously then Chris, and we'll hand over to Cathy in just a moment as well. So I founded Business Growth Bureau about 6.5 years ago. Feel very passionately about working with directors of companies to help them to be more successful. But one of the things I love doing particularly is to help people focus on building circular relationships. And I think I have a great desire to see people succeed, and there's something that Chris, you do as well, isn't it, in all sorts of different ways, and Cathy, I'm sure you do through all your excellent work. But Chris, would you be kindly introduce yourself at this point?
Yeah, so Chris Cooper. I'm passionate about helping businesses to elevate their leadership, their teams, and build highly engaged workplaces. I'm also speak around my book, The Power to Get Things Done Whether You Feel Like It or Not, and elevating leadership and building engaged workplaces. I also host the Business Elevation Show for 10 years, 10th year now, on Voice America, which accesses in over 50 countries, and it's an amazing listenership. So I'm pleased to do that, and I get to meet really, really cool, fabulous people like Cathy O'Dowd through that. So it's good to do that. I'm very, 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 very fortunate.
And at this point, it's a perfect opportunity for you to introduce Cathy, I guess. And in a moment, I'm going to just drop out. I'll be behind the scenes, and I'll join everyone a bit later on. But can I let you introduce Cathy at this point, Chris?
Yeah, Cathy. Big welcome to Cathy O'Dowd. I'm trying to think how many years we've known each other now, but it's been a few, hasn't it, since we...
It's been quite a few. We started.
A few, it might be 8, might be 10. I'm trying to think. But Cathy is one of these people who really sticks in your mind when you've met her, because there's a few people in the world like Cathy, but not many. Some of the things that she's got up to, as we'll get to talk about when it comes to mountaineering and expeditions and adventures. We're going to talk about thinking like an explorer today. But Cathy was the first woman to climb Everest from both the north and south sides. Is that correct, Cathy?
Yes.
Excellent. And if you ever remember that movie Everest, Cathy was actually there on the mountain on that night. So as you know, experienced the real challenges that Everest can throw up. She's originally from Johannesburg in South Africa. She's very, very smart. She lives in Andorra. So she had having a fantastic lockdown, and she's adventured all over the place in Central Africa and the Andes, and a year or so in the Alps. She's got a book called Just for the Love of It. She's been speaking for over 20 years, 44 countries. And one of the things I think we're going to really talk about and focus on today is her expedition to Nanga Parbat, and is that Pakistan? Cathy?
That's Pakistan, yes.
Pakistan, and I'll never forget this, because this was a new route, and Cathy was in a team that were trying to do this via the Mazzano Ridge, and no one had done it before. And Cathy, I was watching each day to her social media, and then she disappeared. And every day I was getting up trying to see, has anybody found her? Has anybody found her? And eventually she, several days later, she wanders in and she's safe. But I won't forget that. So a big welcome to Cathy O'Dowd.
Thank you, Chris. It's great to be here.
Well, obviously we're gonna chat about your adventures, but tell us a little bit. You live in Andorra at the moment. How's lockdown been for you? And how are you coping with all that? How do you see it?
Right now, it's pretty good. We actually had a harder lockdown than I think you guys ever had. We had full house confinement for nearly 60 days. All we could do was go to the supermarket and the pharmacy. No outdoor exercise.
Oh, really?
And then they eased that up, and it was an hour every second day, a kilometer from the house kind of thing. What I found interesting, I live in a village. I've got mountainside behind me and forests. It made me really look. I mean, as a kind of a big mountain adventurer, I tend to be eyes up towards the summits. And this made me look at the detail of the small things in the forest by the footpath. And I enjoyed that, although I was glad when it was over and we could, move out into bigger spaces.
Yeah.
And now both my expeditions have been postponed for 2020, travel restrictions. So I'm exploring a kind of a slightly bigger backyard, but we're still talking the Pyrenees, Eastern and Central Pyrenees, rock climbing, canyoning, mountain running. And again, it's interesting discovering how much is available close to home, how much we don't actually need to be running around the globe to pursue some distant objective.
Yeah. So
that has been enlightening.
You've got beauty in your backyard. I've got a little story with Andorra, because I tried to visit Andorra as a student, and 4 of us had bought a Citroen 2CV, and it was something like 425 cc, and we got halfway up a mountain in Andorra with many people behind us, really angry, and we had to get some help to turn it around and leave because it was too steep. So you've got some good mountains there.
We do have some steep mountains, that's for sure.
And one thing I found amazing, which it seems completely unfair, you've your internet connection in Andorra, you've got a download speed of 280, an upload of 250. I live 8 miles outside of Leicester in the United Kingdom, and the best I can be given is 7 download and 1 upload. So you're very sad.
It
Very
really is.
smart to live in Andorra, I reckon. So tell us, yeah. I mean, you've got this incredible life and background, and you've got your own business as well to help. Also, you speak at huge conferences and events all over the world, and it helps sort of fund your expeditions. But maybe we should start with, because we're going to talk about Think Like an Explorer, and hopefully draw on that around maybe some ideas and thoughts that can help us run our businesses more effectively. But tell us about the difference between expeditions that are great for media and those which are really, true pioneering today, because it's true pioneering gets more and more challenging, I would imagine, in the mountaineering world.
It does. The mountaineering world as it stands kind of in this decade of the 21st century is in a slightly strange place, because it all looks the same. You put a photograph of Instagram of you on the summit, say, of Everest, and look, there you go, great achievement, right up there, shoulder to shoulder with Edmund Hillary. But it's not true. It's the same place, it's the same kind of type of photograph, but Everest in, say, 2021 is now a straight commercially run bucket list challenge and not terribly difficult. There is now effectively a safety line from base camp to the summit. You don't even have to bring an ice axe with you. You just clip into the line and, push your way up the line in the queue. As long as you're facing up the mountain rather than down, it's fine. You're going towards the summit. It's really, it's physically tough, but all of the judgment, all of the skill is gone. But that's not what, photographs well on Instagram. So people miss the hollowness of the kind of some of these modern mountaineering bucket list achievements. It's very different from what actually made Everest this extraordinary metaphor, this thing that we use when we talk about challenging ourselves, about achieving really ambitious goals, conquering our Everest. The heart of that challenge was the idea of doing something that no one had ever done before, of not even actually knowing where to go, how to start, what was going to be involved. So to step into the unknown with nothing but your skills, your experience, and the team you've chosen. Now that's the essence of an actual pioneering achievement.
And how does that pioneering achievement sort of relate to the business today, do you think?
Oh, I think there's much the same thing happening in business. What we've got now is a hell of a lot of people copying each other. And, that can be a perfectly valid way to make good money, to run a good business. You take an idea someone else is doing and try and do it slightly better, or do it in your market, or whatever it is. But you're still going to get stuck, because that space will get completely saturated by everybody copying the same idea. And how are you supposed to lead that market? How are you supposed to stand out in that crowd? You will be pulled down by the people copying you. So you need to step out of that crowd and start looking for the things that haven't been done before. But of course, there's a reason they haven't been done. It's hard. So now you've got to step into that space. You've got to anticipate failure. You've got to anticipate acute uncertainty, the possibility that you're going to get it wrong in at least 7 different directions before you finally work out what you're doing. It's not easy to innovate. It's not easy to imagine something that no one else has managed to imagine before. But that's where you're likely, if you can get it right, to make a real difference with your business.
I've got one of my connections who runs quite a sizable business, and it's a very mature market that they operate in. They operate in hospitality and have lots of pubs and restaurants and things. And he always talks about finding white space in that marketplace. So that was quite appropriate, really, to you and snow and mountains. So you decided the true pioneering then was to go and visit this white space in Nanga Parbat and climb something that no one had done before.
Well, yes. I mean, like your colleague, not every day because this is hard work, but mountaineers are still looking for the white spaces, and they still exist. They're getting harder to find and tougher to do. So in this case, it was a ridge, the longest unclimbed ridge in the high Himalaya, and people had tried, which actually is quite useful because there's a lot of useful information in other people's failure. It helps you kind of understand the parameters of the challenge. So people had tried and failed, and we set out to have a look at this and see if we could understand why they failed and what we might possibly do differently to see if we could succeed.
So, and one statistic I read about that wasn't it you'd said that 22% of people who tried to do this actually died?
Okay, very brief aside on how statistics are misleading.
Okay.
The statistic is true, but that is summit to death ratio. What people fail to realize is most people who go onto the mountain never summit.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So this is a way of making a dramatic statistic. But this is where the dramatic Everest and K2 statistics come from. And there are 14 8,000 meter peaks, and Nanga Parbat and K2 are the two most difficult in terms of the kind of summit to death rate ratio of all of those 14,000 meter peaks.
Yeah. So, I mean, you were on the mountain when that movie Everest was filmed. Was 16 people or something die? Was it something like that on that night? Was it? No,
it wasn't 16. Number is rising. I think
I've got the movie. I should have watched the movie. I've got it in. But I've got a few anyway. In
the storm, the movie is about 5 people were killed.
Okay.
I think in that season, in total, 11 people were killed.
Right.
I hope I have that number right.
Yeah. So you've been through, you've experienced that, and obviously you've summited Everest a couple of times. And then you decide to do Nanga Parbat, and of course, some people die, which clearly I guess is probably failure. But do you approach these things with failure being an option? I'm thinking about people who are pioneering all sorts of business ventures and the likes, and thinking about doing something new. Is it okay to fail?
It has to be, because the truth is, if you are approaching a project with 100% certainty of success, you aren't trying very hard. It's not a very ambitious project. No. I mean, there are times when pretty much certainty of success is great, but if you are really trying to do something innovative, failure is absolutely a possibility because you're trying something hard. And I think what's important is, what does failure mean? On a mountain, there are actually 2 goals. Getting to the summit, that's the obvious one. That's the short-term goal. Coming home alive, living to climb another mountain, long-term goal. Trying to keep the 2 things lined up. But if they drift, let's remember to come home alive. Let's take the long-term option, the long-term goal, over whatever the immediate short-term project goal is. So I think failure can be a very negative way of looking at it. There's a point where you're going to need to prioritize long-term survival over short-term achievement. And businesses absolutely face the same challenge. Everyone's seeing it right now in the time of COVID. A lot of short-term goals have been dumped, due to economic conditions. Now we've switched to long-term survival, still being here when economic conditions improve. And a lot of companies have sunk themselves by pursuing short-term objectives long past the point where they should have accepted that it's not going to work, and you need to move on.
And do we need to view failure differently? Because often when you do fail with something, you learn more from that failure sometimes, which is then very helpful further along. So, I mean, with what you do, I imagine you probably had to maybe fail a few times to be able to actually have the skill and the experience to be able to, climb, what is, some feat in the mountaineering world.
Totally, because failure is a very broad field. So if we're going to abandon the climb and try and get the team safely off the mountain, you can do that quickly, efficiently, minimum impact, no injuries. Or you could get completely hysterical, make some totally stupid choices, and end up getting people injured, losing your equipment, potentially still getting team members killed in the retreat. So a failure that you managed well, you learn a lot by having to deal with crisis. And it does a lot for your confidence. Yeah. Because then you can push yourself into a more difficult situation saying, I've got myself out of stuff like this. It's okay. I can keep on moving because I know how to when and how to back away. Obviously, a failure that goes badly can be very demotivating. So it's important that you think about what effective, efficient retreat looks like.
Yeah, it makes sense. So when you're planning for something, when you were planning for that activity, you're doing something that nobody's actually had achieved before. It's out there. It's completely unknown. How did you go about doing that?
It's an interesting two-stage process. So one stage, you do all the research and all the planning that you can. So look at the nature of the challenge. Look at what other people did, why they failed. Lot of interesting information in other people's failures. Then look, carefully. Don't just repeat their mistakes. How are you going to be different? That has got to be articulated. And then you want a meticulous plan of how you think this is going to play out. And along with that, you want to look at all the ways you think it might go wrong and what your strategy is to manage that situation. The trouble is, if you're pioneering, so not just following the fixed line on Everest, but pioneering, you don't know what's going to happen. So having done all of that planning, you've got to get to the mountain and be comfortable with ditching the plan. I think sometimes it goes wrong because people cling to their plan and their plan turns out to not actually be appropriate to a changing environment.
Yes.
And there are problems which you can't predict. You've got to be comfortable with saying certain things, we'll work it out when we get there. And that's a sensible thing to say if you turn up with the confidence and the skill and a diverse team, which means a diverse range of skills. And it's fair enough to say, we'll work it out when we get there.
Yeah. So I think that's true with any kind of in a project. I remember particularly when I used to work in corporates, we create these project plans with all these sort of Gantt charts and all these colors on them and detail and, trying to think about the different scenarios. And then you were a week into it and you had to change the whole thing. You spent more time trying to change in the Gantt chart often than doing the flipping work because you take one move and then there's a different effect to what you expect. And you've got to.
Yeah, so, that's really difficult. As a team leader, you've got to communicate this to a team who would prefer certainty. And I think this is particularly relevant right now when we're in very uncertain circumstances. How do you communicate that changing plans are not failure or indecisiveness, but actually the best response to a very uncertain environment? So how you message this is incredibly important. And finding the difference between bringing in new information, responding to it quickly and intelligently, and communicating that effectively, as against simply panicking and changing your mind every 5 minutes because you don't know what to do.
Yeah. Yes. So is this about, through sort of information and kind of judgment, to create a situation that's actually quite out of your control, through the way that you behave, creating some control in that situation. So you're leading it with certainty, and it enables others to feel like there is a path. That makes any kind of sense.
Yeah, I think what worked for us, and I'm not saying we got it terribly right. We succeeded eventually, but we went way, way, way over the plan. Yeah. And we had some challenges within the team. I think what really mattered was very efficient communication. You need to be getting as much information as you can in this new environment and then feeding it back to all your teammates. And you need to play into, you should be having a diverse team so that people can look at that information and see all the different kind of facets of it as ways of looking at it. Yeah. And then you need to be putting that into an evolving plan while remaining clear about what your long-term goal is. I think sometimes people can feel they've not only lost the plan, but they no longer know what the goal is of the project. And that's where you really start to lose your team members. Everybody's just deeply confused and increasingly demotivated. So if you can keep the goal clear, while also being clear about why the plan is going to have to be flexible, then you can keep your people moving forward.
So just help us understand this feat that you this challenge that you had. You know, I mentioned it was 8,000 meters and it was in Pakistan, but just give us some, just help us understand what it was that you were doing and what your goal was, and the size of the team, and and how cold it was and that sort of thing.
So the route is the Mazeno Ridge. So the mountain has been climbed, Nanga Parbat, but this route had never been climbed. Now, what made it particularly difficult was, if you imagine your standard triangular mountain, this ridge is like this and starts way out over here. So the entire route is about 9 kilometers long. So that's an incredible horizontal distance that has to be covered. And the ridge we're climbing along sits at 7,000 meters. So not sure, 24,000 feet. I'm not very good in feet. Incredibly high. So you imagine you're going to have to camp at that altitude night after night after night after night after night.
Ooh, yeah.
And then because you're climbing along a ridge, you're not going up a slope. There are mountain peaks you have to climb over. So we had about 8 peaks. We've got to go up the side, over the top, down the other side, along the ridge, up to the next one. So you've got this incredible distance you've got to cover at this very high altitude. Because it's a ridge, 7,000 meters, you've got about a 2,500 meter drop on either side down to the glaciers on either side. And there are some places where that ridge was almost literally knife edge. So you cannot afford to come off this. And these very steep slopes are avalanche prone, so you need to stay on top of the ridge. And they have this rotten snow over ice, so very difficult to come off the top of the ridge line. And in some places, pinnacles of rotten rock as well that we've then got to traverse over. So tricky technical climbing with some huge possibilities to fall off the ridge, and very difficult to evacuate. So it's not as if you can get into trouble and then just, go back down. That's what you could do on Everest. If you get into trouble halfway along the ridge, you can't drop off the sides. It's too difficult. You can't go backwards because we've passed a point of no return. We can't climb back over this. So at some point, you actually had to keep on going to finish the ridge. It was very committing.
Yes.
Another reason to be very clear about what your exit strategies are if things actually go wrong. Yeah. And I think the final part of this is Alpine Style. No fixed ropes, no fixed camps, no going up and down to fix more equipment. You leave base camp with a rucksack. What you've got is what you've got. The food, the gas. Gas means water because you've got to melt snow on the stoves. So we're on a 10-day plan and we've got 10 days of food and gas, and that's it. And it should be said, we were nowhere near the summit by day 10. Our plan was hopelessly optimistic. So 4 members of a 6-person team, we spent about 14 days on the mountain before we got off safely without summiting. And 2 members of the team, the strongest 2, eventually summited on day 14, I think, and got back down again on day 18. Oh. So, 10-day plan, 18 days out of 10 days of food. And the final thing is it's a ridge. So normally when you're climbing, you go up, and as soon as you start going down again, you follow your own tracks back down. Nice and easy, you know what to expect. We're having to traverse. going down a route we've never seen before, because to go back along the ridge would just be too far. So there is no point where you're back onto known ground. You're always moving forward into unknown ground.
Wow, he's always kind of burning a bridge behind you as you
Yeah.
leave. Oh my word. I don't know what to say after that. what on earth? What on earth? Inspires you to want to do it? I mean, I assume it's pretty cold as well. It's not going to be.
Oh yeah, I mean the cold is just like high Himalayan climbing. It's going to be cold. Yes, I have to say, based on that description, I don't feel like doing it again. What's the attraction? The fact that it had never been done.
Mm.
To be part of something, to be part of a team that is trying to do something that nobody has ever managed to do before. It's really hard. I don't think you probably don't want to do that too many times in your career, but to have tried it once or twice, it really is an extraordinary challenge to be part of.
Yeah. And how do you Rupert's just put a question there. How do you battle with your mind? And I'm sort of likening this. I just watched on Netflix a series called Away, when people are heading off to Mars, and it was quite clever because it was quite you kind of imagine it and how people are missing home, and how the mind's playing tricks with them. But I imagine on that sort of journey, you must have moments where it's suddenly got really tough, and situations that are potentially life and death, and you've got to sleep as well somehow on these ridges. And how do you deal with your mind when it's sort of saying, I probably should be getting myself out of this situation?
I think for me, there are 4 tools that I can draw on. One of them is big picture. So even if I'm hating this particular moment, I choose to go out into the mountains because I get something from it. So I know that by pushing through this part, I'm going to get an experience that for me is deeply meaningful, deeply important. Some of it is straight discipline. Really big achievements don't come easy. You have got to put the work in, and discipline and determination. The team, that's a huge help. I'm not the sort of person to be climbing mountains alone. And when I'm deeply demotivated, literally looking at my teammates and going like, remind me why we're doing this? Just something, tell me a joke, give me a line, help me out here. Yeah. And I know that I can return that when I'm feeling better about the situation. And the team member who can just crack a joke and help to break the tension and the fear, hugely valuable. And the last thing, honestly, is the sheer beauty of it. I had moments where I was thinking on one hand, like, oh, this is way on the edge. But I'm also thinking, oh, wow, this is one of the most extraordinary, wild, beautiful places I've ever been in. And still having the space to appreciate that beauty, that extraordinary opportunity, that helps.
Yeah, wow. And do you one thing I think is quite interesting when you're making choices, about what to do. You've hit upon a challenge. I mean, do all choices have a right answer, or are you faced multiple kind of options and you've just got to go with one? I mean,
I actually think this is quite an important thing to carry through business life and through expeditions. In a lot of cases, you have a set of choices, and all of you need to make a choice, move forward, and then manage the consequences. It isn't that there's a right choice and there's a wrong choice. There is simply a set of possibilities which lead to a set of consequences, some of which you cannot predict. So there's no point beating yourself up about previous choices like, oh, if only I'd done something different. You don't know what different would have led to. All sorts of things you probably don't realize could have gone wrong if you picked another choice. Better to own the choice you've made and then look at what you can do to keep yourself moving forward given the new set of circumstances.
So you found yourself, you 10 days, you've got you're probably at the limits of your gas potentially in terms of being able to have water. Your food supplies, you're probably starting to ration. and you're faced with an unknown amount of time going forward. I mean, what was going through your mind at that point, and what were the decisions that you decided to make?
One of the things you are doing is constantly reevaluating. So we keep on pushing forward while acknowledging that at some point we're going to need to switch focus to getting off the mountain safely. So it's not as if you're picking one or the other. All the way through, you are revisiting your choices and going, is continuing on still a good choice? What would it look like to decide to go down? The second thing we realized was we eat too much, really. We are so used to using food for all sorts of things, a lot of which aren't about hunger. We were able to ration the food out for much longer than we'd anticipated. And it is possible to go for days on very little food. I mean, you're digging into your reserves. It's not going to work forever. But we can dig deeper, suffer more, last longer than most of us ever appreciate. And there's something to be said for having done things that push you to your physical and mental limits, because it makes you confident. It means you can move forward going like, man, I've done worse. I've seen worse. I've survived worse. I'll be okay. Yeah. So yeah, worth pushing yourself.
Yeah, I'm just sort of thinking now about some companies who have been going through COVID, and maybe people here have had this experience where money's starting to run out. But then I suppose you look into your costs and realize, actually, I don't need to spend that. I don't need to spend that. I don't need to spend that. I can hold back on that. I'm not actually spending much on expenses because I'm not traveling anywhere, and you could probably last longer than you realize, perhaps.
Exactly. I think we can panic too early and not have enough confidence in our own survival ability. It's worth it to go lean, dig deep, and try and keep on pushing forward.
And this is something in here for us all to think about. People here, I'm sure everybody's got plans for the future and are working on plans right now. And is there something that's really important about this belief? You've set yourself a goal. It seems a very challenging one. No one actually done it before, but you have to keep believing, don't you? With a degree of certainty. And actually, your life was on the line if you didn't.
Yes, I think you have to keep believing in your capacity to manage the situation, even if managing means failing, what I would call failing effectively, so failing safely, as against failing in a panic where you make the situation worse. So it's about believing in your own capability to manage this situation. And people ask me whether they don't get kind of afraid as kind of it's becoming more and more difficult, fewer and fewer options to extricate yourself. And for me, I've always had the sense, if you think of being in a tunnel, so the darkness is everything that's going wrong. The light is where you're trying to get to exit the situation. And as your tunnel gets narrower and narrower and the light is getting smaller, you could focus on all of that darkness and feel panicked by it. Or you could focus in on the light and stay very centered on what you can do from where you are now to move yourself forward towards the light, towards the exit from a difficult situation. And so it's about staying positive about keeping a sense of control. Yeah. Staying positive and confident about what you can still do to move yourselves forward to a successful outcome. Even if that's simply just getting out of the situation alive. Dump all the other fancy goals. Just try and extricate yourself with minimal damage.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I was chatting with my colleague 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we made a decision. Actually, we're just going to completely focus our attention now on insurance and financial services, and all these things we're doing in education. We'll do the ones we're still doing, but actually, it's not the most efficient use of our time. But we decided to narrow the focus down. I do loads of work in insurance. He's got a background in financial services, and actually, if we just focus our attention on those sectors, we'll get through this, okay. So that's a really good sort of point there. I'm just wondering, you mentioned there that you got to a point where a couple of the two of the stronger ones decided to kind of continue up. And how do you judge when it's the right time to kind of let go of a goal?
Oh, it's so difficult. And because on one hand, there are situations where it's completely safe. There are situations where it's quite clearly ludicrous to keep on going. And in between is a vast gray area. And the trouble is, somebody else in a similar situation may make a different choice and succeed. And maybe they were more skillful than you and more confident. And maybe they were lucky. Even with highly skilled mountaineering teams, luck is still a part. What happens with the weather, that completely invisible avalanche slope. There are certain situations in which bad luck, it happens. And there's certain situations where good luck carried you through some bad choices. You didn't have to get the worst of the consequences. I think all we can do is try and continue to articulate what our goals are. What are we really trying to achieve in this situation, and help that to guide us. So when the team split, for example, I was one of the 4 people who chose to go down. We'd made one summit attempt already. We'd failed to reach the top. We were basically out of food at this point. We had 2 days to climb down a route, which, as I said, we'd never seen before because we're still moving forward. So I chose to go down because in the end, what I truly value is living to climb for the rest of my life. I'm hoping they'll have some form of motorized Zimmer frame so I can be 95 and having sort of Zimmer frame assistance to kind of keep me out there in the mountains, because I love that space. Whereas I think the 2 guys who chose to try again for the top and knowingly were putting themselves into a very difficult, very risky space. They are both completely obsessive, committed mountain climbers. That's defined their lives. And this was kind of their last chance to do a record-setting achievement. And they did. I mean, they won a Pialet d'Or for this climb. That is world-class in mountaineering. And they were prepared to put virtually everything on the line for that opportunity. Mm. I'm not that obsessed. If I put money on it, I think I'll outlive both of them. But that's because I have a slightly different focus. And it helps that both they and I were very clear about what it is we're really trying to achieve in this space.
Mm. Wow. What an experience. And how, if you looking back on it now and on that experience, is there, what is the overarching sort of message that you, from that experience that you had, or learnings from it that you would take forward into your business ventures and into your any previous activities that you do?
Mm-hmm. Two things, I think. We are, almost all of us, capable of more than we've possibly ever actually tried. We can push further, survive longer, work harder, suffer more than most of us have ever actually done in our lives. And it really is quite inspiring to try at least a few times in your life to come right out against your absolute limits, because it makes you much more confident when you come back to trying, slightly more straightforward things. Yeah. The sense of like, oh, I've done worse than this. I'll be fine. So that's really quite inspiring. Even if, like me, in the end, you got to a point where you said, no more. I'm going to try and extricate myself safely. And it's also quite inspiring to just be in a space that extreme, that utterly wild in the world. I don't know what the business equivalent of that is, but mountaineering, I've been in some places, seen some things that I will carry with me, for the rest of my life. And the other thing I did get from it, though, is the clarity of reaching an edge and going, enough. I've reached the edge of what I value in life, and I'm going to change direction. And although that means I failed, I didn't get to the top, I don't get to share the Golden Ice Axe Award, it also helps to give me clarity about what I really value in life, and to make sure that I've had to articulate that. And it helps to make me confident that I'm walking a path that kind of sits with my values, that is moving in the right direction.
Yeah, well, you achieved something remarkable. It was, one of those things. I think just to take part in it and to get as far as you did, and to achieve what you did, you've got remarkable stories now that we can all kind of draw from. I can't help it. A friend of mine once decided to cook. He decided he'd seen some snails in his garden. He decided to cook them and fry them in garlic, and he was then extremely ill. He hadn't realised that there was a whole process involved. And I asked him, why did he do it? And he said, Chris, I do these things so that you don't have to. And I think that's what you've just done. You've done an amazing adventure. I'm pleased that I don't have to do it, but I've enjoyed learning about your experience as much as I was amused by his. But I think from a business perspective as well, it just gives us all sorts of things. Are we pioneering? Are we looking at new white space and new areas? Are we prepared to move forward with with belief and conviction, and cut those bridges behind us, and mark out a new path? And I think during COVID at the moment, so many of us and people are looking at new business models, and we need to do that. So, your story's got some great messages for us. So, so thank you. I'm going to ask Rupert to come back, because Rupert will be now wanting to find out how he can do it, no doubt, and where to get the gear from, and his team pulled together. So let him join us. Oh, I thought he wanted to be painting.
Oh my God, Cathy, how the hell do you do all that amazing stuff? I have absolutely no idea. Now, obviously, I'm totally in awe of everything you've said here today. I think it's remarkable. But on these particular expeditions, you must have seen something yourself. Lots of examples of things where you've seen extraordinary acts of either human kindness, possibly where people have put themselves totally at risk themselves to help someone else, or something else that's really inspired you. Can you give us an example of something that's had a massive impact on you as a matter of interest?
Well, for what it's worth, the pioneering expeditions, there aren't other teams there. So that's part of the point. So you're actually not in a situation where you're interacting with a whole lot of other people and strangers and that kind of thing. But if we move back to Everest, actually one example from my own team, second attempt on Everest. So I successfully reached the summit the first time. We're trying from the other side. We got involved in another team's tragedy on the summit day, and it all went wrong. We didn't manage to save a woman's life. We found her dying on the mountainside. And at that point, I just was not in this mental or physical space to kind of step past the tragedy of this other team and keep on trying to get to the summit. So myself and my climbing partner, out of a team of 5, chose to turn around and go down. And we were with 3 Sherpas. And now people think of Sherpas as just kind of, I don't know, human robots or something, but they're not. They're people, they're climbers, they're ambitious, and they're so close to the summit. And none of them had been to the summit from the north side of Everest before. And although 2 of them went on and got to the top, Jambu, who'd climbed with us on the previous trip, he didn't even think about it, not one moment. His just thought was, you guys are going down, I'm going down with you. I want to see you safe down. I want to know that this part of the team gets to the bottom safe and sound. And he didn't think for a moment about personal ambition. He thought about seeing fellow teammates safely down again. Right.
Well, that's a real example of someone who really cares, passionately about everyone else too. And also, I think with the people that you do go up with on occasions, you must form a really tight, strong bond with those. even with people perhaps you don't like sometimes as well, because even if you don't like someone, you still have to get on, because you're sort of presumably 20,000 foot up a mountain, and you're actually sometimes quite dependent on each other to support each other, I guess, at times too, aren't you? In terms, I appreciate there's teamwork as well around all of that.
Yes, although frankly, I'd say I don't think you need to be, bonded for life and best of friends and so on. And some of the people I'd be very happy to be on mountain with are not the same people that, I want to spend the weekend with in town. Think of them as like colleagues rather than best friends. And what matters is that you respect each other and you trust each other. You have a sense that we're on the same side here, we're working together towards a goal. And that can actually be quite freeing, because you don't have to be as emotionally tied up in your team members and taking everything personally. You can treat them as colleagues with a shared goal, and you're going to let some of the emotional stuff go as long as you say trust and respect is at the basis of your team.
Right. Wow. This is so powerful. This is going to be one of these programs, Chris, I'm going to have to re-listen to again afterwards, actually. I regularly find this because actually during the program itself, you're trying to keep an eye a lot on the feed and making sure everything's working okay. And sometimes you miss some crucial bits that people will say. And there were so many golden nuggets out of this session today. And it reminds me greatly of that time when Neil Lawson was on air the first time as well. I don't really know Cathy.
I know Neil. In fact, Neil and I were on Everest at the same time.
Oh, wow. Of course. Yeah, earthquake as well, wasn't it? So,
that was a different one, wasn't it? You weren't there for the earthquake.
Neil's, I think it was probably Neil's first Everest expedition and my first Everest expedition were the same.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Right, well, thank you very much. We're going to just have a little bit of a final wrap-up to cover everything off, if that's okay. So let me just do that quickly now. Just a quick reminder of next week. We've got our 3-day mini-conference coming up. For those people who joined us from the previous session, you already know about this already. But it's made up of one 90-minute session a day. You can just join us online. There's no cost for it. This is the agenda. I'm not going to read this out for everyone here today, but this is the agenda for the 3 days. And so do feel to take part. We are inviting people to actually actively take part as well. So if you've got a real question you'd like to ask, you'd like to be actually featured on one of those 3 days, if you could just drop me an email afterwards and let me know what that question might actually be, then obviously let's see what we can do to incorporate you. Perhaps choose one of those relevant topics then, let us know. I'd love to hear from you. We've got several people who've put themselves forward already, so but I'd love to have 1 or 2 more, which would be fantastic. And then over those 3 days, we're going to actually going to have a competition on the last day, the 3rd day, which is going to be the Biz Growth membership. One person will win the £7,000 prize. Blurred it out a little bit just to keep it a bit of mystery to it, but that does include the laptop, the software, and the entire Business Growth Premier package. And in terms of a quick reminder for next week, if you'd like to join us for the networking collaboration beforehand or the live stream, then do register the same way as you did for today. And it's a flexi ticket, so you do that whichever way feels fit. And in terms of our guest next week for the Thursday, we've got Barnaby Winter. A number of you will remember him from before. It's going to be a highly entertaining session. Anyone who knows Barnaby knows he's extremely animated. He loves throwing his props at the computer screen and everything else that goes with it. But it'll be a lot of fun. And what he's going to be doing is really look at it. We refer to what we class as 3 cogs. So it's lead generation, prospect nurturing, sales optimization. What he's going to be talking about is a lot more about when you get to someone who's actually interested in having a conversation with you, how you can take that conversation on to the next stage where they potentially become a customer, but also that when they become a customer, or as he refers to as a paying prospect, how can you nurture that relationship so people actually want to buy more from you over time, or repeat business. So it's going to be a really interesting session, and that content is going to be designed to complement the 3-day mini conference. And if there is a tie on the 3rd day, we're going to ask Barnaby to actually draw the prize on the 4th day. So we'll see what actually happens with that. Now how to register for it very simply. There's 2 options. If you go to businessgrowthbureau.com/ and go to events, you can either choose to book the flexi ticket, which is a Thursday, or you can choose to book the mini conference, or you can do both. But they're 2 separate links from the same event drop-down menu. And a quick reminder, we're here obviously to support you. We recognize that running a business can be a very lonely journey. Obviously, people like Cathy, for example, and my good friend Chris as well, are great inspiration for this. And it's because, we all love to share and help each other that, makes these things happen in the first place. And if you want to remind yourself on Facebook, you can set a reminder for next week as soon as next week's event set up, and also feel welcome to share this with your network as well. You're very free to do that. And for contact details here, obviously Cathy's website is there, cathyo'dowd.com. Cathy, your phone number there, actually has been intrigued by it. Is that your full number if your phone
Yes.
if you're dialing from the UK?
Mhm.
I can't believe people get so fussy about the lack of numbers. It's a small country. We don't need these ridiculously long phone numbers.
What's the population in Dora, Cathy?
About 78,000.
Well, there we go. Might explain why it's a few notes. So is country code 37?
376.
That's the country code, so it's 376, yes. Right? And the rest is your cell number or landline number. So yes. I love it.
Our number's only 6 digits long.
Yeah, you should. Everyone should be able to remember that one, but not me probably. But there we go. And obviously, Cathy's email address is there. So if you've got any questions, do reach out to Chris or me or to Cathy. We always love hearing from people. But I just want to say a very big thank you to everyone for joining us today, and Cathy, for your amazing contribution as today as well. And also I'm grateful for Chris as well for introducing you here today, and also sharing with you, or rather Cathy sharing your exploits to do with us. Chris, have you got any sort of closing comments or points you would like to make as in terms of what has been covered today?
Yeah, I just think, I find Cathy's stories and Cathy always very, very inspiring. And she, I do think in life is about, making the most of ourselves and our opportunities, being the best that we can be. And there's it seems to be, when we're doing that we fall off our bike less than when we become sort of stagnant. And, Cathy does remarkable things. I'm pleased that I've done some little adventures, but nothing like Cathy has. But when I've done them, I've felt truly alive, and I've felt, putting through myself through a bit of hardship. I've felt like I'm really living, feeling the highs and lows of what life is really about, and I think that feeds into running a business and being prepared as you do, Rupert. You push yourself out there with the work you do, and Cathy does. Cathy speaks at huge conferences. We're very fortunate to have Cathy with us today, and I think it inspires you to reach for those heights, go out and explore and take a few calculated risks, and remember that unlike Cathy, we're probably unlikely to die from doing them. I once interviewed a guy. I've interviewed him a few times. A guy called Chad Barr, and he's a lovely guy from Canada. And Chad has done some amazing things with his business, and he's all over the globe. And I once said to him, how is it that you are comfortable to do what you do? And he picks up the phone or ring, chairman and chief execs of companies all over the globe. He said, because it's easy. He said, because when I was brought up in Israel, and I had to go on military service, and military service in Israel was literally finding yourself in a situation where bullets are flying around your head. When you got bullets flying around your head, picking up the phone to someone's easy. And I just, I'm sort of with what Cathy's done. I can imagine when you've done that, you've been on the Mazzano Ridge, that actually other things don't seem quite so challenging. Speaking to the thousands of people you do, perhaps it's not unlikely to kill you, is it, Cathy? So hopefully I imagine those situations give you strength to go out and do more.
Yeah, and I think this thing over resilience is such a powerful message as well. So, and I think it's a bit of an encouragement to us all as well, isn't it? Because in this moment, you know, it's we're joking before everything went on air today about how Chris and I was listening to the first recording, or my friend Derek was listening to the first recording we put out in March. And it was about when lockdown just first started to happen, interestingly enough. And it was a real Groundhog Day moment. That's the only way it can be described. Although obviously things aren't as bad as it was then. But it was a lot of the points in there were very relevant still to business even now. And of course, your message today, Cathy, has really all been about leadership and resilience and mindset and, you know, everything else that's gone with it. And I've certainly been really inspired by it. And I think many others have been on this call. So a big thank you from me. And Cathy, I don't know whether you, from this experience today, obviously slightly different technology probably to what you're normally used to dealing with. But have you anything particular comments you want to make to anyone here listening, taking part today?
I think my sort of basic motto for life would be, don't pursue the kind of the shallow goals, the Everest, the really easy way just for the Instagram summit photo. Pursue skills and experiences rather than bucket list achievements, because it's a steadily building foundation of experience and skill that allows you to deal with uncertain moments like this one in the world. It gives you the flexibility, the self-confidence, the resilience, and the kind of the creativity of mind that allows you to look at a situation and goes like, I wonder if I can find a different way out of this. I wonder if I can plot a new route and take myself and my team along that line.
Right.
We only get ourselves to do that successfully by having tried it before.
Wow.
So yeah, get out there and try things.
Wow. I love it. I think that's a perfect note in which to end on. So thank you very much, Cathy. Thank you, Chris. Really enjoyable session as always. And I look forward to seeing you all again next week. So thank you everyone who's taken part today. Been a great session of enjoyment. Thank you. Yeah, take care. Bye-bye. Bye.
Cheers, guys.